Today on TFBTV, we're going to look at the HK VP-9 and VP-9B and compare some of the pros and cons of the more traditional American button release and the European paddle magazine release. The HK VP-9 and VP-9B is a polymer striker-fired 9mm handgun, which, I mean, if you're a boomer, I guess you could get it in 40. It is available. Overall length is going to be right at 7.34 inches, height 5.41, width 1.32, and the barrel, which is a 6-groove polygonal barrel, is going to be 4.09 inches. So first off, just a little bit of history in general on the VP-9. A lot of people believe that the VP-9 was kind of H&K's first entry into the striker-fired market. Just a little bit of Googling and you'll find that actually, not only was this not their first, but they were actually the first with a striker-fire design with the VP-70. The VP-9 is kind of, and this is a gross overgeneralization, but it's kind of more like a striker-fired version of the HK P30. It was designed to compete with something like a Glock 17, Glock 19, a full-size, duty-size type gun in the civilian market. If you've ever gotten anything or shopped anything from HK, they can be a little pricey sometimes. The VP-9, which the VP stands for the People's Pistol, is designed to kind of come in at a more competitive price range. You're looking at something that's going to probably have a street value of around $500. Again, comparable to your Glocks and your Smith & Wessons and things like that. Another big thing about it is that it takes the P30 magazines. So they already had the P30 out. The ability to use those same magazines interchangeably just makes manufacturing easy, keeps costs down, all that kind of stuff. One kind of drawback of that, if you will, is even though the gun is basically the same size as a Glock 17, it's only going to, the magazines only hold 15 rounds versus 17. So that is an intentional thing according to HK, because the two rounds less are supposed to add a little bit of increased reliability in the magazines. You know, I won't argue with their German engineering. I'd rather have the 2 rounds, but again, 15 rounds is still respectable. The guns originally came out in around 2014, so they're coming on about 5 or 6 years being out now. That being said, a lot has happened since then, so it kind of begs the question of, you know, what's the current place for it? First off, if you've ever shot anything from HK, be it the sub guns, the long guns, or the pistols, they're very nice pieces of equipment. They're very high-end guns from a fit and finish and kind of manufacturing perspective. What I particularly like about the VP line in general, I hate to use the word ergonomics, but essentially the ergonomics of how it interacts with your body. This very high and deep back strap, which is interchangeable not only on the back strap, but also the side. So you can get some girth or some rounth, if you will, as well as the back strap. So it's going to fit a lot of people. Arguably, one of the drawbacks of some of the guns like a Glock, at least the earlier generations, you're going to have a lot more flexibility and adaptability in this. The originals, or the standards, if you will, are going to have the European magazine release, the paddle release. That's going to make it automatically ambidextrous as far as the magazine releases. You also have slide releases on both sides. They do come with slanted sights, so for some people that's in regards to defensive use, but plethora of sights out there to change out with them. You do have finger grooves on them, which some people like, some people don't. Accessory rail. Overall, all the typical accoutrement you would expect for a defensive slash duty use gun. Where the big difference comes is when we jump over to the VP-9B. The only difference, in fact, is that instead of the paddle release, it's going to have our traditional American, if you will, button release that is also swappable left to right. So it's not ambidextrous, but it can be made, it can be ambidextrously used, and I know that's not a word. So overall, you can search, pretty much everyone's had great experiences with them. They're extremely reliable guns. A lot of people rave about the triggers. A large portion of the community believes that the Walther PPQ has one of the best out-of-the-box triggers, and this is often considered to be a very close second. I personally am not a trigger snob. I'm not really into the nuances. I know a good trigger and a bad trigger. I can tell you that this is a very good trigger. Okay, it's a single stage smooth trigger, relatively sharp take up. I mean, it's just a good trigger. Having had a bunch of Glocks and Smith & Wessons and things like that, without question, out of the box, a better trigger than a stock Glock or anything like that. Let's talk about from a usage or a training standpoint, that paddle magazine release versus that button magazine release. Is one better than the other? This is one of those times, one of those few times where I think it truly does come down to personal preference, but in context. And what I mean by that is take someone like me who's been training for quite a few years, have hundreds of thousands of rounds down, almost exclusively button release magazines. I have a tremendous amount of time, repetitions, money invested in that skill set. If I discard that and now try to jump to a paddle release, is that change worth the loss of that investment? I'm going to say no. That being said, I don't think the jump will require too much. One of the benefits of the paddle release is you can, if you are left-handed, obviously, you have the ability to either use that trigger finger to do it, or if you can reach it, you could also use your thumb to do it. If not, you could treat the paddle release exactly how you would a traditional button release, and you're just going to jump that grip a little bit and pop it out. I think that biomechanically, the downward angle that you're going to get on a paddle release is probably a marginally more efficient design, but it's not enough of an improvement to offset everybody's general experience with it. If you had never shot a button magazine release and decide to start off with a paddle, okay. But for someone who has all that invested in it and is going to try to carry one for defense, certainly a marginal investment in the training and the repetition, and that's what you're going to stick with. But jumping back and forth could be a little problematic for some people.
All right, guys, so we got both the HK VP-9 and the VP-9B, which is the push button mag release. As a left-handed shooter, I kind of tend to prefer the European style mag release. I'm able to actuate that mag release with my trigger finger quite easily. It's pretty easy with the actual push button as well. It's just I feel like the European mag release gives you that capability for ambidextrous use. So I kind of tend to prefer that one.
In regards to speed, one of the things people often ask, well, is one magazine release faster than the other? That's not something you can compare, because you can't compare my speed in doing one to someone else's speed in doing the other, because we're different people with different backgrounds. You also can't take one person who has more experience with one design and compare their speed with that design to another design. Even when people have tried to do it and looked at it and tried to be as objective as possible, the margins were so small. It doesn't take a very long time to get the hang of it. One of the benefits of the paddle is you can use that. You don't have to as much or at all, depending on how your hand size and design fits with that particular gun. You can get away with not losing that high firing grip by using your trigger finger or that middle finger to release it. Now, that requires a little bit of dexterity in your hand. Not everybody's going to physically have that. If you're going to go from experience of doing a button release to that, it's going to require some training investment. So is one better than the other? I'm going to say no. I think it's literally, they're literally the same. It's more of a question of context. If someone handed me one of these guns, first off, I'd be very happy. And two, if they handed me one that happened to have a powder release, I'd look at it and go, all right, cool. And I'd catalog that in my head and move on. Does that mean I might not jump it over? Nope, I may. And if I do, it's not that big a deal, because just jumping it over is going to put my thumb in pretty much the same place it'd be if I was going for a button. So it's really one of those rare things that is, I think, a preference. That being said, every other gun I got's got a button release. So if given the option, okay, I'm going to grab the button release because that's what I'm used to. So great guns. Literally not a single negative thing to say about their reliability or design. But when you're looking at these little nuances of the only difference between the two of them being those powder releases, a lot of people fret over that. I really don't think it matters, depending on your hand. If your hand truly fits, not feels, but fits the gun with the powder release better, and you can manipulate it more consistently, more fluidly, and possibly faster, rock on. Understand though that the majority of the guns, almost all other guns that you'll encounter, are going to be button release. So if you put that same amount of time that me or others have put into the button release side on the paddle side, and then you end up having to pick up and use for a period of time a button release, that's going to require some adaptation as well. So reliability and shootability, if you will. The guns are reliable. There's really not much else to say about it. We've had VP-9 here at the shop at St. Bernardino Shooting Center for about the last 3 years. We've got a couple thousand rounds through it. No issues, no breakages, nothing. No problems at all with it, related to the firearm. As far as how well it shoots, it's ease of shooting, it's comfort, if you will. I personally like the very high backstrap, low bore axis. Lets me get a little bit on the gun a little more for shooting at speed. For me, what I liked and noticed that was kind of unique with this gun, and again, it's a fitment issue that I think has to do with this it's how my hand fits this gun. But a lot of people on things like Glocks and M&Ps will put what they call gas pedals or accelerator cuts, where they'll stipple in or Dremel in like a little ledge to apply downward pressure. When I get a proper firing grip on this, I'm able to actually get right into this back edge of the tack rail, and I mean, it gives me a good purchase. So when I lock out on it and I'm shooting, I've got good downward pressure. I'm able to get a good grip and lock on it. So if I'm shooting at speed, I mean, the gun doesn't move. On both versions, one of the things they have on them are these little wings on the back. Depending on what technique you use, be it an overhand, some people come forward of the ejection port, and of course some people do a slingshot type. This can help just kind of get you a little bit more friction on it. I don't see where it doesn't hurt to be there. I don't think you need it, but certainly doesn't hurt to be there, and they can be removed if you don't like them. So that's gonna be the VP-9B for the American button release, and the standard VP-9 with the European powder release. Either one's going to be a great option for a duty gun or concealed carry gun. Solid, reliable guns that shoot well and are extremely accurate. That's pretty much what you need. I want to take a moment and thank our sponsors. First off, Ventura Munitions for giving some ammunition for me to kind of run through these. I've shot them a good bit over time, but these two particular guns just kind of getting my reps in. And then also, of course, Blue Alpha Gear, who makes some very great belts. I'm actually using one half been for quite a few months on duty. Their inner outer belt, so there'll be something coming about that. But as always, guys, you stay vigilant, stay prepared, y'all stay safe. 1 with 1.32 with a 4.90. How do you say f***ing asshole in German?